Hey there guys, this is Greg with NFG Customs, and I know so we did the last live session that we did. We kind of we talked about tools and a whole bunch of stuff. We were on here for like an hour chatting it up. So and I really wanted to get started with the whole the Autococker 101 idea. I think so as we talked about in the last video. Not much, Justin. Good to see you here, man. So some of the things we talked about in the other video really was, there's a lot of other groups out there, and they're doing videos, and there's a lot of tech help out there. But I really think that I think a lot of the basic stuff that there's not a lot out there that's kind of easily accessible. There's not a. I hope so, Mike. Hey, how'd you guys do today? I was trying to read the score sheet, but I couldn't make out what was going on. I guess he's not paying attention. Anyway, so I feel like there's a lot of. That's not too bad. It seems like a lot of guys were getting, it was kind of split down the middle. There was a lot of 2 and 3s and 3 and 2s. So sounds like it could be anybody's event down there. Yeah, Justin, I tried watching it too a few times, and it was breaking up. I couldn't see what was going on. I saw the Master Blasters. Yeah, that was the game I saw. I think I saw the one on the mounds. Yeah, that was you guys on the mounds that I watched. And I use that term "watched" very loosely. It was, it was a really crappy feed, unfortunately. But I guess we're not. I guess we're not to the point where we need go sports yet. So, anyway, so for those of you who aren't familiar, there's a big tournament going on down in Florida at. What is it? Gator Paintball GPX, I think it's called, and a lot of the old school mech teams are down there. Misfits are down there. Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's it's just one of those things. They were streaming over Facebook, and I mean, it's Facebook. You're not paying for it; it's free. So it's just one of those tough things. But well. Hopefully you guys will have a great day tomorrow. I'd like to see the Misfits kick some butt too tomorrow. So anyway, so there's a big tournament going on down there, and that's what we were just talking about. So anyway, so back to the discussion at hand here. So there's a lot of other groups out there. There's Joe Drager's group, AC. I can never get it right. ACT3, Autococker Tech Tuning and Talk. Actually, Mike, I'm not sure if we're going or not. We've been kind of kicking around. Are you going to be up for PBE? Maybe we'll just take a trip down to see you. Yeah. So anyway, so we're going to. There's a lot of groups out there that have a whole bunch of, good technical information. Hey, you too, dude. Rest up. I want to see a good performance tomorrow. Anyway, sorry, I keep getting distracted. I don't get to talk to Mike that much. So, so we have ACT3 out there. I know that my buddy Jake Branny, he's got a page. Dustin Parmley, he's got a page. So there's a lot of guys out there that are doing some really good stuff, showing a lot of really cool concepts about how to do this, how to do that, how to fix this, how does this work, how does that work, and that's awesome. It's great that they're doing that, but I really wanted to kind of talk about some of the more basic things. And I think as we move through the group, I think we'll get into some of the more advanced stuff, maybe a lot of the more advanced stuff. But I think for right now, I want to begin at the beginning, and we start at the base, and then we can just kind of build up from there. So, crispy, ladies and gentlemen. So, but yeah, so guys like Dustin and and Jake, they're doing some really cool videos. They're showing you guys, working through the process, teching on a gun, and that's awesome. It's great that they're out there doing that. But the focus of this video is more to, this live session is to just kind of talk through how everything works. So I want to begin. I have an autococker here. We're gonna go through it. We're gonna talk about the parts, what they are, what they do, and this is going to be a high level thing. This isn't going to be, we're not going to really drill down. So, but yeah, so I think for the purposes of this, let's try and reserve your questions till we get through it all, and then after that, then we can go through and talk about the questions that you have. If something is unclear, we'll try to clarify it, but I'll try and keep everything as simple and to the point as possible. So anyway, let's get started. So right here, this is my personal Inception Designs Ripper, and Dustin is talking about being naked. Oh boy. I'm getting flashbacks to ICC already. So anyway, so this is an Inception autococker. Now, yes, this is a brand new autococker, but there's really not a whole lot of difference in functionality, really, from the old cockers. There's some new things. There's some, parts are kind of, redesigned and made a little bit better, made a little bit more efficient, but it's yeah, I don't know. I can't read what you guys are saying, and I have to kind of tilt my head all the way down here, see what I got to do to read. So I guess I could, let me set my iPad up, and then maybe I can, next it'll echoey and all that shit. Never mind. Anyway, keep your questions to the end, please, and let's go ahead and get started. So this is an Inception Designs autococker. As I was saying, it's an autococker. You have a lot of guys, the new ones are whatever, or the old ones are whatever. And at the end of the day, an autococker is largely an autococker. It's going to function and use the same type of principles as any other autococker. The things that really make the difference are your selection of parts and how you have everything kind of set up. So anyway, so let's talk about the parts at a very high level, and we will begin at the beginning. So the first part that we're going to talk about is the ASA. So this is the Air System Adapter. That's what ASA stands for. Originally, when you bought an autococker, you didn't get an ASA, and you didn't get a reg or an expansion chamber or anything like that. Here, you could just screw your CO2 bottle right here into a vertical ASA. Now, the purposes of this part is to allow delivery of air to the system. The next part here, these are macro line connectors, and as the name kind of states, these are used for connecting macro lines so that you can move air from the ASA to the other part. Now, in this case, this part here is a regulator. The purposes of this is to regulate the air down from whatever output your tank is to a usable level for the gun. So a lot of valves work best in the 300 to 350 range. Some a little lower, some can go higher, but that's generally a good working range. Now, your tank regulator, a standard, like you buy a tank, and unless if you specify super low pressure or super high pressure, it's going to come at right around 850 output. So if you were to run that into your gun, your valve wouldn't work too well. So you'd have velocity issues, the gun might not cycle right. So you need this intermediary regulator to step that pressure down. So the next part that we're gonna follow here is the vertical ASA. On the Inception Designs autocockers, the vertical ASA and the front block are are combined. It's one item. So it's a front block / ASA. That's how it's generally referred to. And the purposes of that is it provides it's the next step to allow air into the gun. Now the front block, basically what that's for is it's a mounting place for your pneumatics. The inside of that has air channels built in so that air can get to the LPR and in here to the valve chamber. Next part here, this is the body right here. So that's the body. That's where that's where the valve lives, the hammer lives, the bolt, all the internal parts of the gun. This section here, this is the frame. So this is your main interface with the gun, is the frame. And then the next step down is you have your trigger and your trigger plate. Well, I guess this would be the trigger shoe and the trigger plate here. And then inside of here, there's a sear, and then there's some springs in there that make everything work from a frame perspective. So this is called a pump arm, and the purposes of the pump arm are to take the energy generated by the ram and transfer that energy back here to the back block, or motion rather, I guess it's probably a better thing. Basically, this is the connector between the ram and the back block. And I know this is kind of like, well, duh, but we're going real basic here. So that ram, as air goes in the front of the ram, it's going to push this back. As air gets pushed into the back of the ram, it's going to pull it front. The bolt is back here, right there. And then we have a bolt pin that secures it into the back block. The other back block component, it's not really a back block component, but the other part that the back block interacts with here, this is the cocking rod. Okay, and then this is called a cocking knob right here. And kind of the purposes here is this cocking rod connects to the hammer inside the gun, and when you pull it back, the hammer then hooks onto the sear, and that's how you get your action. So this back here is a beaver tail. These come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes, but the main purpose of a beaver tail is to prevent you from thumbing the cocking rod. So you can goose a little bit of extra velocity out of there if you push on that when you shoot. Don't get caught doing that. People get really pissy about it, but whatever. So moving up here, in this area here, I guess on the body we should have talked about this. This area here is the detent. There's a lot of different versions of it. This here, Inception Retro Autocockers, they use an Ego style detent. So there's two rubber nipples in there underneath of a plate. There's some other, this style right here, this is a ball bearing detent. So there's a little ball in there it's like on a plunger, I guess, for lack of a better term. And then the ball rolls in, and the paintball rolls in, and that ball holds it right here in the feed neck, and then the bolt comes forward and pushes it past the ball detent, and then the little ball in the ball detent gets pushed up into the housing, and it allows the ball to pass. And then you're using, essentially, the barrel to hold that ball in place. Next thing is the feed neck. So straightforward, this is where you're going to put your hopper so you can feed paint into the gun. And then we have our barrel. A lot of barrels are two-piece. You can still find one-piece barrels. So in this case, you have a barrel back and a barrel front. If this was a freak barrel, this would take inserts that are different sizes so that you can bore your paint correctly for your gun. This piece right here, this is called the LPR. This is a low pressure regulator. And the purpose of the LPR is to regulate the air that comes in from the ASA to the regulator through the front block to the LPR to regulate that air down so that it can function with the ram and be switched by the three-way. So basically this is, the function of this is very similar to this. It's stepping it down. So in this case, you have air coming in at 350, and then you have an LPR. These run, I'd say usually around 80, 90 psi, depending how much mass you're using. If you got O-rings on your bolt, whatever. Some guys run it real light, some guys run it real heavy. There's a lot of guys out there who just they crank it all the way in, and it just jackhammers the gun. But anyway, that's the story for another day. So this is a regulator just like this. The function is, well, I don't know. The function is not the same, but what it does is kind of the same thing. So now this piece here, this is the ram, and the purpose of the ram is to push against the pump arm to actuate the back block, which in turn moves the bolt and cocks the cocking rod. So this is going to push. This is going to move back. The bolt is going to move back. It moves out of the way of the feed neck, allowing a paintball to drop in, while simultaneously cocking the gun by pulling the hammer back and engaging the hammer lug with the sear. So that's that. Let's flip it over here to the other side, and we'll talk about this side. So the things over here that we want to pay attention to is right here. So we have our three-way. Sometimes this is called the four-way, but essentially all this is it's a pneumatic switch. What this does is that you have your middle hose is an air supply. So the air comes from your tank into the ASA, through the macro line, into your regulator, through the front block, into the LPR, and then it goes through this hose from the LPR into the three-way. And when the three-way is forward, it's going to send air through the front hose, which in this case on a retro gun, well, actually this is going to be true for any. Well, we'll talk about three-ways later. Anyway, for the purposes of this gun, it's going to dump the air into the front hose. The front hose is going to dump the air into the front of the ram. When the three-way is actuated back, it's going, I'm backwards. No, when the three-way is actuated back, it's going to dump that in. Sorry. I'm a little tired today. So when the three-way is forward, it's going to dump this air into this hose to the back of the ram, and it's going to pull it forward. So when you pull the trigger, you are allowing the air that's coming in here to get moved to this hose to push the front block back. It's going to push the plunger in the ram that way. And then when you release the trigger, then it's going to switch back. So it's just moving back and forth in there, and it's going to move air to this hose, which pushes on the plunger in the ram and pushes that plunger forward, which in turn pulls the pump arm forward, pulls the bolt forward, and at that point it doesn't really do anything to the cocking rod because it's latched into the sear. This component here, this is the three-way stem. On this, you'll find either 2 or 3 O-rings, depending on the style of three-way that you have. Inception Designs, so the UFC and the UFC V2, those are both 3 O-ring type three-ways. And then also the Bomb, that's a 3 O-ring type. And then there's a lot out there that are 2 O-rings. So WGP stock three-ways, those are 2 O-ring. Free flow bullets, those are 2 O-ring. And they all do the same job. The only difference is which way, how that little guy is going to handle the air coming in and how it's switching. But again, that's something that we can talk about another day when I've had a few less beers, because it actually is a little confusing. For me, it is anyway. And then, so the purpose of this collar, or not collar, of this shaft is to, it moves back and forth, and it holds the O-rings that allow this to function as a switch. So that's what that is. And then the last part is the timing rod. And this is what allows the trigger to interface with the three-way. Okay. My preferred three-way style, I don't really have one. I mean, I like how both shoot. From a tech perspective, I prefer the 3 O-ring types because I find them easier for me to tune, and it allows me to do, you know, crazy stuff like an insanely short trigger pull, like this 1 millimeter trigger pull on this ripper here. So that's why I kind of like the 3 O-ring versions. So let's take a quick break from this, and then let's see if anybody has any questions that we can answer. So Ed, we are going to do a complete video, but we're not there yet. So the purpose of this is we are starting at the very basic. This is a basic kind of instructional course or video, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, but I think that there's a lot of guys out there that have done build videos from start to finish. I think there's a lot of guys out there that are doing tech videos, and they're really helpful. It's good that they're doing that. But I think that we need to, it's nice to have some more basic information out there. But yes, we are going to do a build. I actually have a very special gun coming in sometime next week, and I've been really thinking about using that as the subject of one of these videos, is, you know, building that gun up. So it should be pretty cool. So does anybody have any questions on any of the parts that we kind of went through? You know, just you can throw a thumbs up and then type your question or something like that if you have one. Exactly, man. We're just hanging out. It's just a nice, friendly conversation, back and forth. Yeah, I do need to talk to you more, Ed. I love talking to you. You got to come up to ICC this year, dude. You can crash with me and Smith in the Love Wagon. It'll be great. We can make an Ed and Dustin sandwich. That's disgusting just thinking about it. Okay, so if nobody has any questions, I want to move to the next thing. And the next thing I really want to talk about in this video is just how the gun functions. Again, and we're going to move very slowly from start to finish. Okay? So, back down. All right. So again, please save any questions you have to the end. It's very difficult for me to read what you guys type. I think it'd be really cool if you guys could like dial in, but I don't know how to do that capability. I don't even know if it's there. So anyway, so I think what made the most sense to me when I was thinking about this is to explain this. We'll get there, Greg. So I want to explain this from the point. So basically, I want to explain how the gun cycles. All right. So this is how the gun starts. You know, you pick it up, you're ready to play. This is the condition your gun's going to be in. Trigger is forward. The cocking rod is not cocked. The back block is forward, and step one is you are going to, you pull the trigger. That's your first step. Boom, you're pulling the trigger. Now, everything that happens in that trigger, in this trigger pull, is defined by the timing of the gun. And in this particular case, this has a really stupid short trigger pull. So maybe that's not the best example to do it, but hey, we're going to use it because this is the gun I grabbed. So when we pull the trigger, well, let's assume the gun is cocked at this point. So when we pull the trigger, the first thing that's going to happen is in here, you have the hammer, and it's hanging up on the sear that's in this frame, right? So when we pull the trigger, the first thing that happens is the gun shoots. The sear lowers as you pull the trigger. The sear goes down, and then that releases the hammer. So there's a lug in there, right, that sticks down through the hammer that interfaces with the sear, kind of like that. And you pull the sear down, and then the hammer can go. All right. So that's step one in the trigger pull. And that is when you're going to get air released from the valve, and it comes up through. So, well, I guess disoriented. Anyway, so the valve is here. No, it's more here. Sorry, it's hard to see what I'm doing here. Anyway, so the valve is going to dump the air up into the bolt, and it's going to shoot the ball and right out the barrel. Okay, that's that. Now, as you continue pulling that trigger, that's when you begin to actuate the three-way. And if we remember, as this moves back, it's going to switch the air. So there's a little O-ring in there that basically the function here is that there's a middle O-ring that it goes between the front of the front of this hose, well, the barb inside, to the back of the barb, and that is what actually makes the switch. So we're going to pull this back. That's going to move the O-ring back here and allow the air supply to switch from this hose, which is why there's pressure against the back block. When the gun's aired up, you can't pull it back because it's pushing air back here when it's at rest. And then it's going to move that O-ring back here, and it's going to push that air into this hose, and it's going to then push the back block back. When the back block is back, if you look in there, you can see there's my bolt. And when the back block is pushed back, the bolt is there. It should clear that. It should clear the feed neck enough for a paintball to get in there. Some guys think there should be a little peak of it in there. Some guys think it should be right there. Some guys think it should be back a little bit. In my opinion, just make it so it shoots good. I think every gun is a little bit different. You can't set them all up identically, even though I try hard to do that. Especially with these, they're very, very close, but they're never exactly the same. So that opens up the feed neck. The ball drops in. So let's assume we have a ball in the breech, well, at the bottom of the feed neck, ready to be pushed into the breech. So this occurs. This is the stop point right here. So when we pull the trigger, this is where it stops. All right, right here. Breech is open, trigger is all the way back, and the back block is all the way back. Now, when we release the trigger, so when the trigger is coming forward, this O-ring then moves in front of the hole in the three-way, and it dumps the air into the rear hose. And this just pertains to this gun. I just want to make that clear. Well, not this gun, but this style of gun with a slide frame and a three-way, and a 3 O-ring three-way. So it's going to dump the air into the back of the ram. So the air is coming in back here, and the plunger in the ram is then going to be pushed forward on the release. And what happens when the gun goes forward in the release? The back block gets pulled forward like that. The bolt closes and pushes the ball into the chamber. Actually, I probably shouldn't do this because I'm going to forget about it. You know what? I don't feel like opening up a bag of paint. But anyway, you can use your imagination. There's a blue and white paintball in there right now. And so as that ram pushes the plunger, as the ram plunger gets pushed forward by the pressure from the three-way, it closes and pushes the paintball into, so basically right here, it's basically in the barrel at that point. For all intents and purposes, the paintball is in the back of the barrel. It sticks out just a little bit, and then you are back to. So once that closes again, you are back to your starting position. So when you pull the trigger, it starts over again. Now, so that's kind of the basic functionality of the gun. So just to kind of quickly, so to quickly review, we pull the trigger. First thing that happens, hammer drops. Second step of the trigger pull, the three-way pushes the air into the front of the ram. The front of the ram pushes the back block back. A ball drops into the breech, and then we release the trigger or begin our forward stroke. Air from the three-way goes to the back hose, to the back of the ram, to push the plunger in the ram forward, to pull the back block forward and push the ball into the back of the barrel. And while that's happening, in the frame, as you're releasing that, the sear is coming back up. And that sear needs to be back up in time to catch the hammer as it's, so basically so the hammer can catch. All right, so the three-way, or not the three-way, the sear needs to be back at the rest position before the hammer can move forward enough to where it's past that sear. So that's one of the reasons why your back block setting is important. Now, in most cases, it's pretty easy and straightforward to set your back block and your pump length and everything, but you need to have enough in there to be able to engage that. You need to be able to engage the hammer before it can, before it kind of can skip over the sear. So a lot of times it's this setting here, this cocking rod. Guys will dial that thing in as far as they can, and it's not just on these. It's on. I've seen it a bunch of times on autocockers, and when they do that, then this isn't coming back far enough. I mean, it's coming back enough to where a ball can drop in, but then it's coming back too soon, and it just skips over the ram, or not the ram, the sear. I'm sorry. But then when you're messing around with it, you can pull the cocking rod back, and it'll cock fine because you're pulling it back, and your fingers are a lot slower than a pneumatic ram. So that's that. Now, one other function I want to discuss is the safety. In the video the other day, we talked about how we remove and install a safety. So let's go back to our example frame that we had, and we'll talk about that safety real quick, because you can actually see in here and see what's going on. So if you look here, we got our safety, and when you see the little red rubber band or whatever that thing is, I guess it's it feels like it's rubber or something. I don't know. I've never really looked into it too much. Maybe it's an O-ring. I don't know. So you can look in here. This is your safety right here. And when you pull the trigger, this moves over the safety to allow the gun to fire. The safety functions by essentially it makes that center part fatter. So guess what? The trigger can't work anymore. You can't pull that trigger. So the safety functions, so it has this locking function like this, because inside of here, and it's actually like right here on the gun, there's a spring, and on top of that spring is a ball bearing that pushes into, I don't know if you can see in there, but there's a little groove right here. And that ball fits into either this groove or the groove right next to it to allow the safety to be on or off. So that's that. So that is, in a nutshell, that is the basic, Mark 1 Mod 0 functionality of an autococker. Every autococker on the planet is going to work using those same principles. The first thing that's going to happen is you pull the trigger, and the second step is the hammer drops. The third step is the three-way activates, and it pushes the ram backwards. Paintball falls in, hammer cocks. Next step is the trigger begins to move forward. As the trigger moves forward, it moves the air from the front of the ram to the back of the ram, which in turn pulls the back block forward, leaves the cocking rod back, because it's going to engage the sear. The hammer lug is going to engage the sear, and then it's going to pull the bolt forward to essentially it closes the gun. So it's a closed bolt gun, so it closes the bolt, and then and then the cycle is reset and it starts all over again. So that's kind of that. So let's start talking about some questions. So who's got some questions something that you want clarified or something? Yeah, Justin, I there is a thing that I can add people and bring them on camera as a guest. I would assume you guys have that option somehow too. I don't know. I'll look at the settings and stuff, but I don't know that we really want to have you guys. I don't know that we really want to have you guys just like jumping in, and then because then I won't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll figure something out. Maybe we can use like a phone or something. Just post a number up and you guys can call in. I don't know. So Scott wants to know what causes blowback. So blowback can be caused by a couple of different things. In a lot of cases, it's poor timing. So blowback can be caused when, if we think back to how the gun cycles, and I'm going to take it back on something good looking instead of my ugly mug. So if you go back to the cycle, the timing cycle that we just talked about, blowback happens in most cases when the gun is too tightly timed. So when you time a gun, there's going to be two distinct steps. Just like we talked about. You have the hammer drop, and then you have the three-way becomes activated and actuates the ram and yada, 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 and it pushes the back block back. Now, if you do not have enough time in between the hammer drop and the back block moving back, that can cause blowback because the air is still coming up through the port, and then you have this thing moving before that air is completely vented, and then you get air coming back up through. You have air coming back up through your through your feed neck, and then that bounces up into your hopper. And if you're not using a force feed hopper, your paint's jumping up and down. You can break paint that way, because it just messes everything all up. So blowback is a pain in the balls. Some other things that can cause blowback if your bolt O-rings are worn, that can cause blowback. Now, if you look here on the Inception bolt, this guy actually has 3 O-rings. So we have 2 O-rings that essentially isolate. These O-rings isolate the air going into the bolt. So this creates a seal between the valve port and the hole in the bolt. So we shouldn't have air escaping through here, or at least not a significant amount of air. That's going to help with efficiency. It's going to help with blowback. There's a lot of bolts out there that are Delrin that don't have any kind of O-ring. And I mean, they work well, but generally they have a giant hole. So, the burst of air, it goes into the bolt completely. I don't know if there's really a downside to that design. It's just, it just is what it is. Now, on Simon's bolt, he has a 3rd O-ring here. And the reason being, so in order to get efficiency on the retro platform and a lot of other autocockers, to maximize efficiency, you want to use the maximum amount of air that you can. So efficiency is a measure of how much waste. So you're dumping X amount of air from the valve into the bolt to propel the ball. Now, if you use the less air that you can use to propel the paintball, the better your efficiency is going to be. So in this case, and this is true with other autocockers, no matter what kind they are, if you want to increase efficiency, you're going to want to use a bolt with O-rings on it, because you want to use as much of that air as possible. Now, how does that relate to blowback? Most bolts have either 2 O-rings on them or no O-rings on them. And I kind of think that Simon's bolt I think that might be the only one with 3 O-rings now that I think about it, or at least one that's all the way at the very tip. And what that allows is that provides a much better seal against the body, so against the inner tube of the body here, so you don't have air escaping back here to this first O-ring. So air theoretically could get as far back as here. Now, depending on how tight of a bore you have, which whenever you're shooting an autococker, you should have a pretty tight bore on it. You should not be able to blow your paint through. It should definitely not fall through. A lot of the guys converting over from electro guns, they think that, I can just goose up the pressure, and that does not work. So, essentially, you want to be able to capture as much of the air as possible in this little area to propel the paintball. And by doing that, you're reducing the amount of wasted air that's getting blown back over the bolt to this O-ring. Because if that air is traveling from here to here on all sides of the bolt here, it's waste. It's not propelling your ball. So by stopping it here, you're going to use more of the burst that you released from the valve onto the face of the paintball, which is going to propel it down the barrel at a higher velocity with less air. Okay. And in the case of the Inception valve, just because it's pretty cool. I remember I was sitting here just staring at the valve one night, and it just all kind of came, just like a ton of bricks hit me in the head. So that valve has a very controlled burst of air. So it's one of the few valves that has the length of the stem has a pretty good impact, has an impact on how much air you can release. And typically, compared to other valves, the inception valve is shorter. And the reason for that is that allows the valve only to open a certain amount, a certain distance. So it's a very tightly controlled number. And once the valve is open, it's going to, I mean, it can release a lot of air. It's a very high flow valve, but you want to, so it's going to dump a lot of air, but you want to close it as fast as you can because it's dumping so much air. So in order to make sure it closes fast enough, you want to make that distance as short as possible. I had another valve here just a second ago. How did I get on valves? This is kind of an advanced topic. What the heck did I do with it? I literally just had it in my hand before I started the video. And I just dumped springs everywhere. Damn it. Is it under here? All right, well, we'll get into valves some other day, I guess. So anyway, so timing is a big cause of blowback. If you have, worn bolt O-rings, that can cause blowback. If your paint is insanely too tight in your barrel, that can cause blowback. So those are the three biggest ones. Obviously, there can be some other things that can contribute to it. Maybe you have a damaged bolt. Maybe the body is scored or damaged on the inside. You see that sometimes with older cockers that used metal bolts. Back in the day, guys would make bolts out of all kinds of stuff. So anyway, so that's blowback. So do we have any other questions? Anything else we want to talk about today? I guess we're down to 2, so I guess we're done. So, hey, not a problem, Scott. I guess I probably went a little haywire. I have a tendency to go off on tangents. That's why I'm such a terrible person for doing things like this, because I'll just go off on a tangent thinking about stuff. And that was a perfect example right there. So, all right. Well, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead. You can shoot a PM to me, or you can message the NFG page directly, or you can post the question up in the group, and we can address it there as a group. Hey, that's fine, man. Ask away. That's exactly what the purpose of these are. It's a chance for you guys to talk with us, and so we can help you figure out what's wrong with your gun. And honestly, if you have a problem with your gun, we can go into here and we could do a tech session on here. You could broadcast and we could kind of say, hey, you need to check this. Oh, you need to check that. So I want to make this a very collaborative group, to where we're helping each other out and helping each other learn. And Eric is 100% correct. Information is information. Oh, and Mr. Eric, thank you. My package arrived today, and check out this hotness, guys. This is a Predator Camo Evil Gerbil bounce cap. And this thing is super sick, and I can't wait to get it all dirty and muddy in a couple of weeks when I go to play. So, thank you very much, Eric. This is awesome. For those of you that don't know, Eric owns Evil Gerbil Paintball. This guy, and he makes some real badass stuff. They do headbands and head wraps and jerseys and all kinds of different soft goods. So if you're looking for anything like that, make sure to hit them up, because their stuff is spectacular. And I mean, I used to do bounce caps. That's how I launched nuclear paintball, was with a bounce cap. So I know, and this is freaking awesome. This is a great quality item. So I'm super stoked. I can't wait to try it out. Anyway, so I'm going to sign off. It is 11:30. I'm a little tired. because I was up way too late last night working on guns yet again. So anyway, so have a great night, and I look forward to talking to you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.